Recovery Sort Of is a podcast where we discuss recovery topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The attitudes expressed are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised, there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
Welcome back. It's Recovery Sort Of. I am Jason, a guy who is at times intolerant.
And I'm Billy. I'm a person in long-term recovery.
I'm Jenny. I'm also a person in long-term recovery.
I'm Caroline. I'm a person in long-term recovery. Being really loud.
That was extremely loud. I'm also sometimes intolerable, which is a whole other thing. And if you haven't figured out, today we are talking about tolerance as a spiritual principle, which is, I guess, one you don't hear that often, really. I mean, I don't remember it being, like, I don't know. I always hear the honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, you know, humility, surrender, acceptance. Like, I don't hear tolerance all that often.
Yeah, well, I think that's a skill. That's like a muscle that you build over time, you know? It's not one that most of us come in with right away. It's more like it starts with, like, acceptance, which I think acceptance in the beginning for me was like, just don't get too mad or hate other people too much. Like, you know.
When I hear tolerance in recovery circles, it's more like, yo, I drank 14 Miller High Lifes in the woods. I'm up there. Like,
Yeah, my tolerance is up there.
Your drug tolerance, yeah.
It's just interesting because I feel like it is maybe, I don't want to say one of the more important spiritual principles, but maybe it's just one of the neglected ones, fellowship-wise. Like, I never heard about it much, and I feel like it's something we generally struggle and lack a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about it more. Maybe there'd be more of it.
I mean, in one of one of the NA readings, you know, it says one of our critical problems could be an indifference or intolerance towards spiritual principles.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, we talk about that part, you know, but the idea of tolerance doesn't get brought up, but it is mentioned as being a significant barrier to recovery if we are intolerant of spiritual principles.
And that's relevant, too. So one of the things, guys, we said we were going to do this year was talk about the opposing defect. And I was kind of thinking last night, I think intolerance is the opposing defect.
Does that make it easy for all of them? Like, honesty,
Right.
dishonesty,
I mean,
willingness,
some of them might be that
unwillingness.
easy. Yeah. I mean, what are you guys' thoughts? Is intolerance the defect that we can apply tolerance to?
Oh, this is going to be an interesting discussion. Let's get there in a second, right? So the first thing I wanted to say about what Billy was just saying was, like, it almost reminds me of the idea of the removal of danger not equaling safety, right? Like, the removal of intolerance doesn't necessarily equal tolerance. It just means you're no longer, like, intolerant of
It's
it.
indifference.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And there's a big difference between kind of like this neutral, indifferent feeling and maybe a tolerant feeling. Of course, I got some arguments about how tolerance maybe isn't all that great either later on, so we'll figure that out. Let's start with the definition of tolerance, right? That's a good place to start. So the definition, not the first definition, mind you, because the first definition had tolerance in the fucking definition, which is exactly what they told us not to do in school.
Right.
And it pisses me off that, like, these big companies making money can get away with that shit. So anyway, tolerance, the capacity to endure continued subjection to something, especially a drug, transplant, antigen, or environmental conditions without adverse reaction, which I thought was an interesting caveat at the end, because my understanding of tolerance does not fit that. There is always an adverse reaction if I have to tolerate something because it's fucking bothering me.
Are you truly tolerating it then, though?
Yeah, absolutely. Not according to this definition. But, okay, so to me, if I just can be happy with something existing, or be pleased or feel good in my body with something existing or going on around me, that's not tolerance. That's just, oh, hey, this pleases me. This is great.
So, and I looked up a definition right before we came on today that's slightly different than that I liked better. Like,
Give it to us.
I hadn't thought of tolerance in the way that description defines it. So
Okay.
this one was
That's interesting.
a sympathy or indulgence for beliefs or practices differing from or conflicting with one's own.
Ooh, sympathy or indulgence?
Yeah, which is more the way I think of tolerance. It's like, oh, you have a different point of view from me. Let's talk about it. Like, I'm not just going to shut you down and call you stupid and walk away. I want to be
Yeah.
open-minded. I want to be like, hey, well, I'm willing to hear you out.
Let's use that definition for this, because I feel like the one that I just read is more like the metal quality on this ship can tolerate the salty water in the ocean. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
this feels like it's different kind
Or
of
how
tolerance.
much pain can you tolerate
Yeah.
if someone starts punching you in the arm? Like,
Okay, so let's start over, and I'm going to read Billy's phone. So the definition is sympathy or indulgence for beliefs or practices differing from or conflicting with one's own. Sympathy or indulgence. That's interesting.
Well, an indulgence implies that you're actually
Like
seeking
curious.
it out, right?
Right.
That you're actually engaging with it and not just
Like oh, Billy.
accidentally caught up.
Yeah, Billy, your agnostic beliefs are actually interesting to me as a guy who believes in a universal power. Like, please tell me more about that so I can learn how you and which is exactly what this podcast has done. I think for a lot of people, we've learned Billy's take on these spiritual principles being applied in a non-Christian way, which I think a lot of people really like.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for tolerating me.
Yeah. We'll tolerate you for now.
So it's not just like allowing it. You have to like submerge in it. That's not how I was originally thinking of tolerance. Like I always thought it was like, well, you could do whatever you want just over there. Like I tolerate that just over there. But so tolerance assumes that you have to also get into it to some degree.
Well, and for me, that's the difference between something being like an actual spiritual principle or a spiritual practice. You know what I mean? Like it's not just something that I'm enduring for the sake of enduring. It's something that, how do I lower my defenses, lower my anger, resentment, fear? Like how do I minimize that stuff and like actually engage in a conversation with somebody that has differing viewpoints or differing opinions?
I just can't wait till I run into a group of people doing mushrooms so that I can be tolerant and indulge with them as a spiritual principle, because I want to be a good person. Really.
Right.
But you know, I hope you find those people. But yeah, it makes me think of, so, I mean, this isn't me or any of us here, but people don't tolerate homosexuality. So pride parades and stuff like really offend them. You know, like you don't have to join the pride parade, but you know, you should be like tolerant of it. You know, I'm just trying to think of that example, like walking through that.
Well, interestingly enough, I just watched a whole sort of, I'll call it a docu-series on how a young lady got, I'll use the word brainwashed into becoming like a white supremacist by indulging in like being tolerant of it. So she started dating this guy and sort of into their relationship. He said, oh, by the way, you know, I'm a fascist. And she's like, I don't even know kind of what that is. Like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. So she was like, well, I'll look into some of these beliefs. I'll learn about them so that I can tell him how stupid that is and how wrong he is. And then her tolerance in that eventually led to her turning into a fascist white supremacist, you know. So there is some, a danger maybe, or some
so that like
things
like
you have to be careful of.
Did they use the term Stockholm syndrome with that?
Not in this case.
Is that the
they
right one,
didn't,
Jason?
yeah.
Am I using the right syndrome?
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
Oh,
I was
I
trying to do some lighting over here.
Okay.
Me and Billy are a little dark.
Okay. Stockholm syndrome is like the one time the woman was kidnapped into a terrorist group and then she became a terrorist. Is that Stockholm? I got to look it up now.
Well, this story was slightly different.
Munchausen syndrome? What do you mean?
That's not
Munchausen by
Munchausen.
proxy
Yeah.
is when you do it to your kid, I think.
Yeah.
Stockholm is when you like empathize with your captor. So
Yeah.
There we
like,
go.
to
Okay.
a degree.
Okay, empathize with you.
Yeah,
So this
we're-
one she wasn't captured. What happened was they introduced ideas slowly. So when she first got involved, it wasn't we're white supremacists and we hate all other races. It was like, we think our European culture should be celebrated, and we think, you know, it should be fine for us to have pride in our heritage, and we think, you know, that society's trying to push us away. And she's like, well, that seems reasonable. And then they go to the next step. And then they go to the next
This
step.
does
and
sound
then they
like
go
12
to the
steps.
next step.
It does sound
and
like a
then
big
by
book.
the end, you're like brainwashed into thinking that, you know,
We're not
The Jews
saying
will not
anything else
replace
is
us.
bad,
Right.
but you know, our version of recovery has just worked for us, and it's
Right,
good. We don't
right.
promote it. We
It's
just
okay
attract
that you
people.
don't believe in God.
Yeah.
Just try this.
Yeah, just
I
talk
mean,
to him.
that is a fear, and so it does. And maybe this is why tolerance is a better principle to have later on. It's like, you know, in the beginning, as you said, with my tolerance, I was exactly that. I would be like, that medicated assisted recovery isn't really a thing. That's just, you know, that doesn't work. And, you know, these other fellowships don't work. None of that stuff really works, you know, and it took some more deep thinking about things or being open to ideas to hear why things like harm reduction help or why these other programs might work. Like, but I didn't have that skill in the beginning.
So tolerance requires open-mindedness.
Yeah, I think that's foundational. There's also some sort of like self-worth and self-respect and self-esteem that comes along with it. Like you have to, for me anyway, I have to be confident in my beliefs that when someone starts saying conflicting beliefs, I don't immediately get into this defensive, argumentative, angry place. Like, I'm confident enough in most of my beliefs that if you want to have a conversation with it, I can disagree with you or say, oh, I don't feel that way, you know. And I think that's why Jason and I communicate really well, because we can talk about stuff, and I don't ever feel like, I mean, obviously we're both trying to sway each other's opinion, you know. Our goal most of the time is to get the other guy to say that we're right and he's wrong. But we're not so
Does that ever happen?
like, stuck there that we have to butt head. Well, it's funny. We agree probably more than we disagree. It just doesn't sound that way.
It doesn't happen in the moment, but if you listen to our episodes over time, you'll hear us start going back and agreeing with shit we used to argue about.
Right.
So I think maybe one of the things that's standing out to me is this idea of tolerance and the definition of it. I don't think the way it is understood on a mass level in our society is the way we're talking about it, right? Like, I do believe a very healthy version of tolerance is like some sort of indulgence or appreciation or compassion towards some differing opinion. But the way I felt tolerance was supposed to be practiced during my time in 12-step really was like, it's kind of just like putting up with shit you don't like. It's just not being a dick about it mostly. Like, and that is not a healthy thing, I don't think. And so it's fascinating. I think if we just said tolerance to most people, they don't think of it as like positive vibes towards the person they're tolerating. They think of it as like, oh, this is something I must endure so I can get to heaven at the end of it.
Right, like a hardship.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. So tolerance assumes like a healthy self-esteem.
Yeah, I don't know what tolerance assumes, but I think our version of what we think tolerance is just putting up with people. It's not like a positive spiritual
Yeah, maybe
principle.
that's what we need to change some, you know, like that's, again, most of these words, when you look into any of these spiritual principles, have multiple definitions, you know, as we've talked about with love and unconditional love. And, you know, there are ways that you can apply those things that aren't as meaningful for me. So it's important for me to figure out, all right, this is what I think this word means, and this is how I think it should apply in my life, and use that versus, well, society thinks it means this, so I'm going to live that way.
And I don't disagree with that, but I don't know that like any time in my first 5 to 10 years I had any ability to think that way or like I'm going to go with what I understand tolerance to be. And even when I look it up, just like I did 2 days ago, I'm going to get a definition and I'm like, oh, okay, here's the first 3 definitions. Let me pick one of them. And none of them said anything about anybody's belief. So it was like, you know what I mean? I think this has like spread to everyone in a mass way so much that even the dictionary definitions that I looked at didn't include anything about the version you're telling me. You know what I mean? So I didn't even know that version existed to explore it. Is what I'm saying. Like I might not have stumbled across that even the way you're talking about. You know what I mean?
So is there, Jenny, our resident Buddhist practices person, is there like a tolerance understanding within Buddhism or within recovery Dharma? Do they, is that expressed in any direct
there's
way?
like compassion. That's my go-to answer.
Yeah.
Compassion.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that is pretty
Mic
much
drop.
tolerance.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's compassion. I get, compassion for everyone involved. So it's not just compassion for your audience, but also for yourself. If you can't tolerate that, you should not continue in the situation.
Well, and I think this is, for me, again, goes back to, like, say, the foundation of unconditional love. So if the foundation of my life is built on this unconditional love for others, then I can be more tolerant, patient, understanding with people. If I'm starting from a place that, yes, all human beings have value, all human beings have worth, everyone has a right to have thoughts and opinions and exist on this planet. You know, some people have bad ideas. Some people aren't that smart, you know, like there's all those things too. But if I can at least start from a place like I care that I don't offend or hurt other people, that gives me this foundation to be more tolerant.
That's what I kind of meant when I was like, tolerance assumes a healthy self-esteem. Like, I think to properly implement tolerance, you have to be like Billy, start from a place of, you know, I have respect for all life.
Well, let me just be clear. I didn't start there. I got there after 20 years. No. And that's the difference. Like in the beginning, my understanding of tolerance was very similar to what Jason said. It's like I will just, you know, silently sit over here and boil while someone says something in a meeting that I don't agree with, or they violate some tradition in a meeting, and then almost feel a need to go fix it or correct things later. Now I see that stuff and I'm like, I don't know. It's not my home group. It's not necessarily my place. What fuck gives me the right to run around and try to police the world because people have different ideas or opinions than me?
You know, that happens in AA too. Like, so there's a lot of like love and tolerance. Like they use that as like an excuse to like put up with stuff. So if something happens in a meeting and like somebody, particularly a new person, relatively new, you know, didn't agree with it, doesn't like it, like love and tolerance, just keep coming back. You know, so they always use that as like that phrase tolerance, like just put up with it, you know, but it's not until like, you know, later years, you have that 180 about tolerance.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, tolerance doesn't mean that I agree with that stuff either. Like just because I am willing to listen to or be sympathetic or respectful to someone's point of view doesn't mean I agree with it. I can be completely tolerant and then be like, oh yeah, I don't think that's a good way to look at that, or I look at that differently, or I don't think that's quite right.
So that seems to me like an emotional maturity thing. Like I'm not going to change their mind. You know, I'm not going to do anything about it. Have a nice life.
Yeah, most of that is what gives me the right to be the one that needs to change everyone's mind. You know, maybe my mind is the one that needs changed and I'm wrong.
No.
One thing that's come up for me a lot with the talk of healthy self-esteem, I think on the other end of the spectrum is there's this perception of people who tolerate a lot, maybe not. I feel like this is not coming out the way I want
like
it to.
Like codependents and people pleasers.
Right. Well, or even like tolerating abuse, right? Like there's people who it can appear that you're very tolerant, but it's actually coming from a place of low self-esteem where you're willing to tolerate a lot of like just unhealthy behaviors from other people and put up with it. So there's a spectrum, and like in the middle is where it's healthy, but both sides potentially can be rather unhealthy, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's where we come with a lot of these spiritual principles. It's like a rigid, dogmatic practice of any one of these things can be detrimental to your life. You know what I mean? Like unconditional love isn't just I go out and just become a doormat to the world and let everyone walk all over me or take everything from me or abuse the shit out of me. Like that's not unconditional love. I mean, I guess in some ways it is, but that extreme of any of these principles becomes the defect. That's almost where that whole concept comes from. It's like if I'm so intolerant and I lack any sort of self-worth, self-respect, then I just become this doormat to people.
And I think this is a huge point that I have loved about this spiritual principle discussion. It's this idea that like I always thought we were going for 100% spiritual principle practice in all affairs, right? That was the goal. 100% honesty, 100% open-mindedness, 100% tolerance. And to know that that's actually not the goal, and that might really be like the unhealthy swinging of the pendulum to the other end of the spectrum when I first get in recovery, and then needing to kind of slowly meander my way back to center. But I think it also proves a second point, at least in my mind, from the therapy world. When you described that, right, what you just laid out, Caroline, was this idea that, like, really what we're talking about when we're talking about this practice of tolerance along this spectrum, it's not really like any active choice or how someone was born. You related it to their attachment type, right? Are they somebody who needs to, like, put themselves down and accept anything to stay in a relationship, to find worth, to find value. And then attachment types come from childhood, and then childhood stuff comes from pain and trauma. And it's like, when I look at it from that lens, that doesn't say specifically that we can't increase our level of tolerance or change our place on the spectrum through healing, but it does take this whole thing back to healing in my mind and growth in more of a therapeutic sense. And it makes me wonder how much the information I got in 12 steps of like, just practice tolerance. Just go ahead and practice that tolerance, buddy. Like, yeah, come on,
Right.
come on, you could do it. Come on, right? Like, that's all the fuck I got. And that was useless because nobody's saying, oh, dude, you're not going to be able to practice that tolerance as long as you're all fucking hurt still. Like, that's got to heal first. And then you'll just naturally be better at tolerance because you won't feel so fucking bad in your body all the time. And it's like, I don't know, man. The more I keep thinking of this kind of thing, the more the 12-step approach of like, just fucking practice these spiritual principles seems kind of off.
Well, I think the foundation of the idea of putting up with someone else's opinions is good. Like, I needed somewhere to start, you know what I mean? I needed somewhere to get out of my self-righteousness, you know, and just sitting on my hands and not saying anything was a good place to start. And then this tolerance that I've found now in my life almost came naturally just from continuing to work on myself, work on my spiritual growth and spiritual awareness, and then eventually like, oh shit, I can tolerate other people's opinion. Like, where did that come from?
Right.
You know, like, it comes naturally if you continue to stay engaged in the work.
And I totally agree with that to some degree, right? So if you can stay in recovery, I do believe there is some healing that is going on just walking through the world, not using the substances that used to control our life and make us do things that we didn't like, right? Because that's causing its own damage in itself on top of what we already feel negatively about. So yeah, you get to recovery and yes, like just changing the idea of like, oh wait, there's other core beliefs I could have. I could actually like not yell at people when they're doing shit I don't like. I think that's a great thing to put in our minds early on, right? To start that process. And yet nowhere down the line did anybody come and say to me, hey, if you're struggling practicing these principles after a certain amount of time or after you've done some step work and you still find these are really difficult, maybe there's some more stuff that needs to be done underneath of that to make it easier for you. Maybe it's not just a moral failing of yours, right? Like, I never heard that message, and what I got was the same thing I got when I left my parents' house. I went into the world. Nobody ever told me that every fucking adult and parent is confused and doesn't really understand life. And I went out in the world and I thought we couldn't tell anybody that, right? Because everybody else fucking understands how they're doing this adult shit, and I'm the one who just doesn't, and there's something wrong with me. And I felt the same way in recovery when after 5 or 10 years, I felt like I was like, oh, okay, I'm like the senior member in recovery now. And I'm like, I still don't know how to practice this shit because nobody has said, hey, if you don't feel good, you might not be able to practice it ever. You actually have to do some other stuff to get there.
So that was never explicitly said to me, but I think there may have been a difference in the message that we were hearing, and maybe it was the area that we were in, but I don't feel like pretty early on in recovery, it became obvious to me that like therapy was another thing you could do to get better.
I wonder if that's because you're a female.
It could be. It could be.
Because in the male world, there's not a lot of like suggestions of like, hey, why don't you seek some outside therapy, Billy? We'll go talk about our feelings and shit.
Could it also be like, you know, like the intersection of 12-step and institutions that provide treatment services? Like when you're in rehab, they're bringing in 12-step meetings, but they're giving you therapy. And I mean, most rehabs, you get therapy. Like most outpatient programs, you're getting some kind of, you're shaking your head. I mean, this is.
I got nothing that looked like any kind of real therapy while I was in
got
any
drug
kind of
counseling,
detox.
but that didn't feel.
I might have got like 15 minutes sitting with a therapist, but we were just talking about like generalized concerns. We weren't doing any therapy or nothing.
Right. But that's your introduction. Like, that's where it's like, okay, this is a part of me becoming a better
That's where I'm still
person.
100% wearing the mask because I am fucking scared to death to not be on drugs.
I'm not saying you solve all your issues at rehab.
I don't even
like,
tell
I'm
them
not
my
saying
issues.
that, but I'm saying
Like, my issues was drugs, and now
I don't
y'all
think
got
I
me off
even
of it.
knew
We're good.
my issues at that point.
Right, my issue was drugs.
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, and I don't know. I can't say like when the understanding that therapy can be a part of that holistic program that helps you get to a happier, healthier place. I'm not sure where that came in. I know it was discussed in meetings. I know I heard that. But I do feel like there had to have been some component of like every treatment center I went to, therapy was a part of it. There was a therapist, there was a counselor, there was someone I was speaking to, and that became a part of my perspective, my
the way you
understanding.
conceptualize
Yeah,
recovery, I get it.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure some of that is cultural as well. In at least in Cecil County, my experience is that admitting that you have a mental health issue and that you might need some sort of outside
help. Bro,
is-
just the way that was air quoted every time it was said made me feel like it was icky.
It very
Could it
much
be
in this
generational
culture
too,
was
though?
looked at as a weakness, and maybe that's a male, that's a male culture thing. But any sort of like, I mean, well, even in my household growing up, like my aversion to any kind of therapy or mental health came from my mom. You know what I mean? She's like, "You're not crazy, you're just a fucking idiot." Like that's the
that feels
culture
way
that I
better.
grew up in,
Tenderness,
right?
wow.
And she's like, because intellectually, like I got good grades in school and I understood what people were saying. So the idea that I had some sort of mental health issue underlying my addiction, like those two things in my world were very different. I was fine, my brain was fine. I just liked doing drugs and I couldn't figure out why.
And I want to go back to this idea that you presented, Caroline, that maybe we heard this different, right? And that could be different based on areas or generations or genders or any of that. They could all be factors. And another factor could be going back to this idea of what our childhoods were like. If I come in and my disposition is to assume that I am at fault for every fucking thing, and you come in and your childhood necessarily doesn't have you operate with the world from that place of or belief, right? I'm not going to hear the information the same way, which is really fascinating. I've really been diving deep into this, like, especially as a parent, what I give isn't always what my kids are receiving, right? And maybe I should check in with them and see if they're actually getting what I hope I'm giving them sometimes. But if we go back to that idea that we had different childhoods and that's why we experienced the information that we heard different, that still doesn't help all the people who had childhoods like me who don't get the message in 12-step that it's okay. Not only okay, maybe highly recommended to like go at least check in with some outside help and see what they think about your place, right? Maybe there's some stuff to explore, maybe there's not, but at least you know. And I think that's the thing. If I didn't know that there wasn't more or that there wasn't another option or that I couldn't possibly practice some of these spiritual principles until I healed more, how could I ever fucking know? And I think that's a place where my beef with maybe the 12-step world is like coming more and more to realize that I feel like being there and being told what the help was, I missed what the help could have been for me way sooner.
And see, I look at it slightly different. Like I don't disagree with where you're coming from, but my experience kind of was slightly different in that I came around to 12 steps and in the beginning it was like, yes, some people get, again, the air quotes, outside help, and that's okay. And in my view, it was like, yeah, that's for like the weak people and other people, but I'm supposed to tolerate that. That's supposed to be okay for them, just not for me. And then eventually I'd talk to more of those people that would say, yeah, I'm doing really well, and I go to this outside help, and then I go, maybe there is something to this outside help. Maybe some people really do need that outside help. Still not me, but some people need that outside help. To getting to a point, later where I'm like, maybe outside help could help me. And then now I go to a therapist. So, the gradual exposure to that idea is what brought me around.
Wouldn't it have been way cooler if, like, during one of those periods of your life where you were really fucking trying to change a behavior and just struggling to change it, whether you were struggling with actually making the behavior change or whether you were struggling with, like, the idea that you were doing something different but still miserable? Wouldn't it have been so cool if somebody would have came up and been like, oh, man, I had that same struggle. And you know what? What I found out was, like, my nervous system was doing this shit. And there wasn't actually any way for me to think my way out of it. And I had to, like, go seek some help and do some healing and stuff for some of the hurt I've had. And you wouldn't have had to struggle as long.
I didn't get
or
it
wait
quite
so
that
long.
deep, but like when I was more open about being sexually abused, which came later in recovery, quite a few people suggested, hey, you might want to go talk to an outside person about that. And I would just be like, nah, I'm good. I've dealt with all that through my step work. I'm good.
Right. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but so some of the ideas that we hear in recovery, like people had been telling me the same shit. Just my tolerance level for listening to it was very different. You know what I mean? Like I was intolerant of or totally what's the opposite of closed-minded? I was going to say unopen-minded.
Unopen-minded.
Right?
Disopen-minded.
I was totally closed-minded to the concept of therapy for me. You know, therapy for anyone else might be okay. For me, no way.
Well, and I like that, but I find it anecdotal in the sense that one of the things I struggled with coming into recovery was my life wasn't bad enough for me to be a fucking heroin user, right? My parents didn't even get divorced. That was my main saying when I came in my first month. My parents didn't even get divorced. What the fuck is wrong with me? So if I don't have any sexual assault in my background, and I am like many, many, many in our society who think their childhoods were gravy and wonderful and their parents loved them, what could be wrong? And can't understand how damaging actually some of the ways my parents were just yet until after therapy and the exposure to it, then people aren't going to recommend that to me. Like, I get it. They did for you because you had a pretty big thing in your past. But, like, for people who don't necessarily have the big obvious one.
Yeah, that's
We're
putting a lot
fucked.
on a group of uneducated 12-step people.
Exactly
that aren't
my point. But it's
professional counselors.
But it's uneducated people whose literature and writings we're listening to. That's a fucking problem.
For me,
That's
I
my
think
point.
The big recommendation, though, was not necessarily someone directly saying you should seek help for this. It was hearing members with time and appearing to have a high level of sanity and their shit together talk about how they had gone and
right?
exactly, people that I could look at and say, okay, they're, you know, they've been doing this a long time, their life looks together, they seem happy, they seem like they're not off their rocker when they share, and they're talking about they want to get outside help at some point in their recovery process. So maybe that's the message, right? Is that, for our listeners, for us, as we're in various recovery programs, speaking openly about your experience with what fully has helped you. And I think that approach is probably more welcome in some meetings than others. But maybe thinking about, like, is there a way that I can share my experience? And if I can't, like, am I in the right program for me?
I don't know. I think Billy just made a really amazing point, in my opinion. To say that we can't count on a group of uneducated people who don't have the professional skills to tell us that, to me says, well, why are we listening to those same unprofessional people in the fucking program they designed? If we can't trust on them, like he said, that was a tall order to ask the fellowship.
I don't know what expectation you put on 12-step groups. I didn't expect to come into a 12-step group and then, like, I came because I had a drug problem and they told me they could help me stop using drugs. You know, the deeper I want to dig into my own mental health or wellness, like Narcotics Anonymous doesn't promise me healing from my sexual abuse or mental health wellness or any of that stuff.
But we have
We're
you
just
talk
a
about it
group
in the
of
fourth step.
like-minded people. Maybe you talk about it as much as you want to talk about it.
I don't know. I think Merck made a good point with that.
You don't have to talk about it when you don't.
We don't, but we also say, yes, we can help you with your drug problem, but we say the disease of addiction, which is what you have, isn't really about the drugs. That's just a symptom. We want to help you actually get better and find freedom from active addiction, which if we're not qualified to recognize when you need more help than we can give you, we're probably not qualified to fucking help you.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you a lot. I feel like you just put a very unreasonable expectation on a free support group of people that doesn't make you come, doesn't ask you to come. I mean, we want you to come, but if you don't want to be here, you don't want what we have to offer, that's fine too.
So let me ask this. Jenny and Caroline, if you two were seeking help for a problem in your life, whatever problem that may be, today, and you went and you sought a place that said they could offer help for that, would you surely hope that if they found that they didn't have the help that was enough for you, that they are qualified enough to recognize that and send you somewhere else.
That would be my expectation.
Well, I guess I look
I
at
don't
it.
know
I'm sorry.
that-
let Caroline
yeah, I
answer.
don't know that I would expect
You don't
that.
think so?
I would think if it's something I'm paying for, if it's someone that I'm going to that I know is certified, qualified, this is their business, this is
But
what they do.
That is kind of what NA says.
I
It
mean,
doesn't
they're
promote it,
not
but they say
certified
we
or
can help.
qualified, though.
They say if you do what we do, we can help. And I don't want to say they market themselves because they obviously don't, but 12-step is like our healthcare's best defense right now against addiction. This is where the professionals are sending people. This is where courts are sending people.
Right, but right now we're getting more understandings of like trauma and the understandings of how the brain works, and like you're talking about with the nervous system, like all
Right.
that stuff is fairly new information, and still I would say not even mainstream information.
Agreed.
You know, for like I guess I look at it more like a church. If I walk out of here and go, I'm a Christian, and I go to a church, and that church tells me what their beliefs and understandings of Christianity and the Bible are, I can either decide, yeah, I'm all in for that, or no, I'm not in for that. But I don't expect them to make the decisions for
Right.
me about what I think about homosexuality or any of that stuff. I go to the church, I hear what they have to say, and go, I don't think that's for me.
But what if you got cancer and you were either court ordered or your doctor said go to the church? Wouldn't you hope the church would say, hey, you've got something that's too big for us to help you with. You should probably go somewhere else because you're just going to die if you keep coming here.
But I guess what I'm saying is I feel like I did get that message.
Does NA promise it's going to help, or does NA promise it's going to solve the problem?
It says
Solve
the
the
promise is freedom from
very
active addiction.
specific problem. But we don't say, NA does not say that we're going to help you treat your trauma.
No, but you also can't solve active addiction if the problem is that addiction is a coping skill for your trauma.
Yeah. Oh, well, we have a differing opinion on that, too. So I don't think that everybody that uses drugs or is an addict necessarily has trauma. I think there are people that use drugs and abuse drugs that just because they like it and want it. And I know you don't agree with that.
I don't think there's a person alive that doesn't have some degree or isn't on the spectrum of trauma.
Oh,
We've
right.
all
Well,
been
yes.
hurt.
Every single person in the
Well,
world
then
has
that
trauma.
kind of
that is.
debunks what you just said.
Well, that's like a default. That's like saying everybody breathes air. Like, everybody that breathes air, is a drug addict. But
I don't
I
know.
guess, yeah,
I
everyone
think it's a
has
big
some
point.
degree of trauma, and our level of tolerance of trauma is very different. Now we're using tolerance in a different way.
I do think that, I don't know. That was an eye-opening statement for me. I get it that it doesn't change your mind, and maybe it doesn't change anybody who's listening's mind. But to me, the fact that medical places where we go for help and courts tell people to go to this program for help, I don't know, man. To me, especially because it's part of my job. Like, if I don't feel qualified to help somebody I'm seeing, like, I damn well better. In fact, I'm, obligated. If I don't and some harm comes to them, that's on me for sure. I could be sued. So I guess operating from that standpoint of, to me, in order to be qualified to help with something, I have to know my limits. To me, says the 12-step world is kind of out of its scope or realm to begin with.
Well, and I guess back to what Caroline said, every treatment center that I went to always recommended some sort of outside counseling when I left that treatment center. None of them said, you're good, just go to 12-step meetings. They all recommended some sort of, drug. And I guess for me, this was the difference. They always said drug counseling. So in my hearing of that statement meant this is something that I just go to for drugs, I guess I would expect a therapist to help me break down. Maybe if I had continued in drug therapy, I would expect someone to help me get into the trauma and all that stuff. But I was unwilling at that point.
You made another point that I found kind of fascinating when, one of your defenses for our debate right there was that all this stuff with the trauma and the harm and the nervous system is all really new and not as worldwide or spread as older information is, which I think is a really valid point. And yet it brings up the question for me, if all this is the new research and we do believe it and we do think research is right, then why aren't we changing and adapting to the new information? That's the problem. It's not that there is new information. It's okay, well, if we accept that, why aren't we doing something a little different that we know could be more useful?
Because it's so slow.
Yeah.
I think we are at a turning point about understanding addiction. It just takes so much. So maybe this podcast will help move it along.
And
a
it's
little
just
quicker.
like tolerance towards, medicated assisted treatment. I mean, slowly, I'm seeing that attitude change, at least in the 12-step people that I am around. You know what I mean? Like in this immediate area, a lot of the people doing the harm reduction work in this community are Narcotics Anonymous-based 12-step people. And so that is a huge shift from earlier on in my recovery when that just was totally unacceptable. You know what I mean? It was legal drug dealing and all this other stuff. So there is a shift. I don't know specifically. I mean, maybe there's points of the program itself we could pick apart, but as far as the fellowship, most of this is just loose ideas of a group of people trying to come together to help one another. And there's so many different people that have so many different needs and so many different issues that it's hard to design a specific program to deal with, childhood abuse, sexual abuse, mental health, some sort of actual mental defects, like all those different things. To have just a general free program that would address specifically every single one of those seems a little difficult.
I think there is a little bit more responsibility on sponsors than there is on the group.
The part of the program that's not even official?
I feel like it's pretty official in
Well, the literature says it's not official in nature.
and I don't know about other areas. It's very official in this area, in Narcotics Anonymous. But I do feel like there's a key part of being a good sponsor is having humility and recognizing when my experience isn't going to be enough for someone and being able to say that.
But I can't recognize that when I can't realize that my experience isn't even enough for me yet because I haven't gone and gotten the information to realize that the way I'm handling shit by yelling at my kids is wrong.
So the difference, I think, for me is like I've given horrible advice to people as a sponsor early in recovery. With a year or two clean, I can specifically remember telling people like you shouldn't go to more than one program, or if you do go to multiple programs, you can only have one sponsor. And I don't know, I mean, there isn't anything in any Narcotics Anonymous literature anywhere that says anything remotely fucking close to any of that opinion that I had. So for me, I take personal responsibility for having that opinion. I don't blame the group or some friend of mine that spouted some bullshit for me adopting that opinion or point of view. That's my responsibility that I gave that bad information. And I sometimes feel like that's something that you kind of assimilate to the group's attitude. And to me, that was my bad lack of knowledge and information. I didn't have a right to say that shit. It was based in nothing. It was no personal experience whatsoever.
So in NA, isn't it more common that people are sponsoring before they complete the 12-step process?
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but I would say that is your personal experience. Your personal experience was you went to one program and had one sponsor. You were definitely sharing your personal experience with them about how it had to be done because you believed that it had to be done.
Oh, yeah,
way.
but now I would say I've never done that. I don't really know. Or if I had even went to some other, I hadn't even ever went to fucking other, I mean, I've occasionally been to an AA meeting, I think, in treatment when I was made, but I hadn't even really went to other programs.
I understand that, but you were doing what you were told when you came in and what you believed was working for you. You were sharing that information, and my question would be, why are we putting people in a position to share really shitty information that they got early on as, I don't want to say leaders, but when I got here and had 2 days clean, the guy with a year was a fucking hero, and I was going to listen to whatever he said, and why are we putting him in a position of that as a sponsor? You were sharing your experience. You didn't do anything wrong there. You did exactly what would be expected of you. The problem was you should have never been in that position.
I don't know.
You shouldn't have been dishing out advice.
I don't
to
agree. Like I mean, I don't know how else you would give a free program out to people to share their experience. Like that's the foundation of the program: is we share our experience, strength, and hope. We grow. We make mistakes. We support each other. Like that's the whole basis of what we do.
Well, maybe that shouldn't be the default
I mean,
way to treat
therapists
this,
give
though.
bad information all the time. There's all kinds of horrible therapy methods
There
that in
absolutely
the last
is.
couple
True.
years. If I picked the wrong fucking guy out of the phone book, he could have me wanting to kill myself in a month, and I'm paying that fucker.
Right, and
can
it's
sue him.
very
So,
hard, very hard to find good therapists as well. It's very hard. There's not, like
Oh, especially when you get into insurance and all that crap.
yeah,
But-
yeah. What I was going to say is, I think you guys are both making fair points, but it's a lesser of evils. So if we do, so the inherent issue with having this non-professional service, where a bunch of non-professionals are doing their best to help people who potentially have really significant issues or trauma, the downside is damage can be done. And I've seen I mean, I had a friend who was gay and was told by his sponsor that being gay is an abomination.
Abomination.
Yeah,
Abomination, yes, and that he needed to pray about it.
Oof.
Like that's really bad information. So
Yeah.
bad things can
But it's
happen.
that guy's experience.
Was it though? Was he
Yeah.
gay? No.
No, but it was an experience with it being wrong. That's what he was told. That's all he knew.
That's a belief. I mean, I don't know if that's
Yeah, I don't know that it's experience,
yeah.
but the experience would be if he had been gay and he was able to pray it away and found happiness.
But his
in
experience
that.
was, I've been other things that are wrong, and I've prayed them away.
Or he knew somebody who was gay and it was bad.
How applicable is how broadly applicable is a specific experience?
Right.
Regardless, I think so. That's the risk. But the other side is we do away with all of these kind of community-based programs, these free programs that are widely available to so many people, and then all of the responsibility falls on the professional services, and there's not enough.
Or this is another place where to continue doing the lesser of two evils keeps us from finding something that actually works way better. Like maybe if we can all agree, oh, okay, maybe there are some fucking places in this program where it's a little goofy. Maybe we can go in and either change that, or we can go in and make it something else. Maybe we can adjust it and adapt it to where we do have people. Maybe it becomes a nonprofit where we teach people exactly how to run a small group meeting. And that's what we do from now on. And it's much more effective because we don't give out bad information. Like sometimes sticking with what so far has worked keeps you from opening up to something that works greater.
Yeah, but I think that, and just to roll back around to tolerance, like that's all what tolerance, like now we're understanding things, let's say in the community with our laws, like we realize we have a lot of racist drug laws that don't work very well. Well, what do I do with that sort of stuff? Do I work towards a solution, or do I just, violate the laws and do whatever I want and suffer the consequences of that? I think it's the same within 12-step groups. Like as a member of the group, I can work towards change. I can work towards having these discussions with people about things like medicated assisted treatment or whatever other these ideas that we might need to come around and change. But I'm not going to do that if I just get pissed off and run away and I'm not willing to have conversations or engage with people in some of these things that I think should be changed. The other side of tolerance is if I don't get a seat at the table, I'm never going to have any influence over, any sort of change or progression or whatever. If everything that I disagree with, I just run away back to my home and ignore and, well, I'm not going to talk to those people because they're assholes, and I'm not going to talk to these people because they're assholes, and I'm not going to talk to these people because they're assholes, then who's going to do the work to try to change the things that need to be changed?
Point number one, that is the third time I've heard you bring us back to tolerance, and thank you so much. 'Cause we are way off of it, and you keep bringing it back, and I love it.
Trying.
Thank you. No, you're doing great. Point number two, I agree with almost everything except the pissed off part, because being pissed off, the point of being angry is to set a boundary. It's to say, nope, you're hurting people or me. Stop that shit right the fuck now, and then it goes away. So I think we are supposed to get pissed off a little bit when things
My
are
wife
wrong.
would agree. She says that's where a lot of activism
Yeah,
comes
it
from,
has to.
is
It has
getting
to. That's
pissed
the
off.
energy,
So,
right?
yeah, she would
but
agree.
yeah, running home is not the thing that's going to help. I totally agree with that, and this is my seat at the table. And I am finally at 42 years old, accepting the fact of my fucking role in the world. I was the problem child in my family home, right? And what that means from a family therapy standpoint is I was the person that was not willing to tolerate all the underlying dysfunction that was going on. And so I spoke up, right? Which did not go well for my childhood. That's still who the fuck I am. When I see something that feels like injustice or unfairness or people being wronged, I fucking speak up. I am a mouthpiece. I am a guy who's going to get in your organization if you hire me, and I'm going to point out where all the shit that is wrong is, that fucking bothers me and feels wrong. It's just who I am, and I'm tired of apologizing for it, right? I don't want to. At 42, this is my role. And look, you play a really important role too. You're the guy that keeps us from doing all the fucking crazy shit that I think we need to switch to, right? Like, I think both of us play a really important role, and I accept mine.
What's
like,
my
this
role?
is mine.
Well, and again, it just
I'm the guy speaking up about it here so that people start thinking about it more, so that the
Right.
fucking fellowship changes. That's my goal. Yes, I want to keep talking about it.
and I guess I want to link tolerance with
Yeah, do it
humility in the in the way that, like, it requires me to have some humility to go into some meetings and express my opinion. You know, it's in my home group or at an area service level or whatever, to say, like, hey, what do we think about, possibly doing this different? Or what do we think about changing the way that we're approaching this particular subject? I need to be understanding that some people are going to be stuck to this idea that this is just the way we've always done it, and so that's what we're going to keep doing. And I just slowly, with compassion and understanding and hopefully from a loving place, try to change that way. Like, I guess I worry that just running out and screaming at people how fucking stupid they are and how dumb this is, doesn't work as good. I mean, it's the flies with honey kind of thing, and that's been my approach. Recently, a thing came up with, my wife and I try to keep this vague, but there's an organization in the area that wants to put on a big recovery event right here in Elkton that is sort of anti-harm reduction, which is against a lot of the things that Voices of Hope does. It's against a lot of what mainstream science is starting to think, hey, this is how we connect people to recovery. So, like, there's a lot of information that says harm reduction is a good thing, and yet there's this community in a part of our recovery community that is very anti-harm reduction. And so her immediate thing, like, my immediate response to her was, oh, well, are you going to go? Are you going to send somebody from your organization to go? And she's like, fuck no, And so I was able to talk to her about this idea of, like, hey, we should go. I was like, I'll go with you. We'll go hear what they have to say. We'll listen to their points of view. I don't think that they're going to convert me to an anti-harm reductionist, and if nothing else, it shows, like, respect for them. It shows a sort of compassion, understanding, like, hey, we're willing to have if you want to have a legitimate conversation about some of these subjects, we can come here and be reasonable people that can have a reasonable conversation about maybe why some of your ideas are not so great.
Billy, if you come back here talking about fuck needle exchange, we're voting you off the podcast. I'm just telling you. Don't get brainwashed.
He'll probably be single too.
Yeah. Well, I guess just back to the NA thing, like, or I'll say 12-step thing. I am starting to see changes within the community. Are they slow and cumbersome and maybe not as progressive as we need? Yes. But if I just get frustrated and fed up and walk away, it's never going to get to where we need to go.
No, absolutely. And the way you laid that out of how you're trying to show up for these people who aren't open to the idea of change right now is how I feel like I'm trying to work on people slowly over time through this podcast, right? Just let me just keep presenting it in enough different ways to where one of them, like, kind of starts to sink in and make a little sense. Like, and yeah, I am the guy who's out there like, fuck it. We all need to just stop working and just do what we want, live in our backyards or something. And I need people like you to be like, Jason, I don't think you're going to be happy doing that either. Like,
I'm not going to have a backyard if I don't start working soon.
Right. So it's we need all of us people. And I guess I'm just more embracing the fact that I'm supposed to come here and get a little feisty and wired up about this. Like 20 minutes ago, my fucking nervous system was lit the fuck up. I literally thought I was going to have to walk outside. Like, I was trembling inside.
Intolerant?
I was. That's why I was like, we were still sitting having a conversation, but I could tell. I was like, Jesus Christ, I am like really activated by this conversation. I don't know. It's just interesting, but that's my role.
And see, I think though that's what helps. Like it helps. Sometimes I have to recognize that stuff too. Like I've learned to recognize in myself. Like once I get to a point of being like defensive and argumentative, my tolerance goes way down and almost out the window. And so I've learned that about myself, even in like stuff with my wife. Like if we're talking about marriage issues or whatever, like in all these areas, like once my defenses start to go up and my nervous system gets way up, my tolerance goes right out the fucking window. And sometimes there is a need for me to say to her, hey, we need to stop for a couple minutes. I gotta like get my shit together, or you're being a little bit attacking. Like I need you to kind of back off because I'm getting too defensive, and I'm not going to hear anything that the fuck you have to say once I'm in that super defensive place.
And going back to that polyvagal theory episode we did, right? That is the nervous system. So all spiritual principles are going to be higher level thinking. They're all concepts and ideals that like a typical animal or mammal based in the world is not going to, ascend towards. They're not working to try to be like honest in the fucking world.
My dog is very tolerant of my puppy. I don't know what you're talking about.
So like these are all going to take prefrontal cortex level thinking in order to enact. And when the nervous system gets activated, there is no conversation with your prefrontal cortex anymore. There is no higher level thinking. So yes, anytime you get defensive is a word we will use, that's a survival skill, right? That's something that comes from a survival place in your brain. You're not going to have access to tolerance or love or anything. Open-mindedness, willingness, they all go away when we get activated in our nervous system.
Yeah, and I think in recovery they always described it as the HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Right.
Like for me, those are all indicators. Like on those days, like if I know I slept 4 hours last night, my tolerance is going to be off that day. Like, and it's important for me to be aware that like my ability to tolerate bad drivers or, people disagreeing with me at work is going to be way different if I'm not taking care of my physical and emotional needs. I'm not in a good place to be tolerant.
That acronym was super helpful to me in the beginning because it was like one of those early steps towards mindfulness. Like, oh, I should pay attention to if I'm angry or lonely.
I think 12-step programs, this would make me a lot happier. If we had some introductory video, right, that you sat down and watched that taught you about nervous system states and what they felt like and how in them you're probably not going to be able to just practice, air quotes, these principles, or you're not going to be a better person, and like ways to calm nervous system triggering that you can start practicing. If we had that as like a sort of disclaimer to understand better when we're falling short on practicing our program, I would love that. I feel like that would take so much shame off of people in our program.
I'm totally down with your video idea. Let's do it.
Here we go. We're going to do an introduction to 12 steps.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Listen to this before you start your fucking recovery journey. This is important.
Right.
Hey, that's actually genius. Let's do that.
We'll get producing right away. But can we go back to the word practice?
No.
So,
Of course we can.
That's not tolerant, JJ.
So the 12 steps wants us to practice the spiritual principles. That doesn't mean do it perfectly right away, because don't we learn more by fucking up? Like,
Yes.
So, like start toying with the idea of tolerance, and you are going to mess up and realize it, and then you will know. Then you will know your level. So, in defense of the 12 steps, they don't say, all right, let's go perfect the spiritual principles. They say practice.
They don't, but to beat up on the 12 steps again, one of my beefs with these spiritual principles is that every month I search the basic text, which is, Narcotics Anonymous main literature. I usually end up looking through It Works How and Why, which is another piece of literature from Narcotics Anonymous. And this month I even did the Step Working Guide because I was grasping at straws. And they mention spiritual principles by name many, many, many times. It is beautiful how many times they mention them, and yet they don't say a fucking thing about them. Every sentence is, you'll be amazed that you have more tolerance than you had before when you show up in this place at the step 8, or when we practice tolerance in this situation that's going wrong, it'll do this. And it's like, it never fucking gives you any tips about what that looks like, how to, things that might get in the way of being able to. Like, there's like literally fucking nothing about how to practice it.
So it's just name dropping.
Yeah, basically.
I think that's on purpose, though.
I agree, and we had that discussion, and I don't I think you're right, and yet at the same time, it gives
Not
us
helpful.
nothing.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
at least throw some real general loose ideas in there to have
Yeah.
something to start with, you know? That
Yeah,
bothers me. I
that-
don't know.
That would be helpful. I mean, don't they do that a little more at the end of It Works How and Why? There's a section about spiritual principles. I'd have to read a little deep. That's the only one that I know specifically gives you like a
Right.
spiritual principle and some direction. But that's getting very specific into Narcotics Anonymous literature. I don't know that carries across other 12-step programs.
And that's only in the tradition section of It Works How and Why. And the step working guides does have a section in each step about spiritual principles at the end of each step too. So they're there, and yet they still don't really say much about
Right.
what it looks like, how to start. And I feel like as a program based on the idea that spiritual principles are going to make our life better as we replace our character defects with them, not telling you how to do any of them is a weird fucking way to explain it.
Yeah. And I mean, another important thing to kind of piggyback off what Jenny was saying, too, is like, I am never going to do any of these perfectly, you know, as much as I can come on here and talk this fucking good game about how tolerant and understanding I am of everyone's ideas. On any given day, I'm like yelling at something on the radio that I heard or mad at somebody at work that has a different opinion than me, you know,
The guy
and
to cut you off in the car.
right, like all that stuff. So these are all things that I am consistently trying to pay attention to and work on. And it's like the nuances are what help, like realizing like, oh shit, I only got 4 hours of sleep last night. No wonder my tolerance is way off today. Maybe I ought to just walk through this day kind of tiptoeing through, hoping not to get in any conversations with people about shit I don't agree with, because I'm probably going to say things I regret later.
Or from a therapy standpoint, instead of just ignoring that part of you that doesn't feel well that day and trying to push it aside, even though that's a good place to start. Like, I don't want to take it out on Jenny or Caroline, right, that I'm having a rough morning. But maybe I could even go further and like tend to that part of myself, right? Like the parent
nap.
that never showed up. like, damn, Billy, what do you need today? Is it a hug? Is it a hot tea? Is it a little more to eat? Is it a little more rest? Like, what can that ideal version of a parent show up and try to comfort that piece of you that's not feeling well that day? Like, that's the, I don't know.
Self-care,
Yeah,
the
that's-
self-care part.
That's the part that might help heal it instead of just getting through it or managing it, I guess.
Right.
So where you might not need to in the future as much.
We have a quiz.
We do have a quiz, and we've also got some tips, and maybe we should start getting into that. Let me try to race through these. These are apparently 8 tips. They're from the website Chopra.com. I don't know. Sounds Buddhisty.
Sounds, yeah.
Sounds
They
Buddhisty.
know
So
a lot about
I'm going to
tolerance.
be inclined to believe that all these are actually real and factual, just without any verification. It says, own your feelings. When something bothers you about somebody else, it is good to remember that it is bothering you. The other person may not even be aware of your feelings, let alone be prepared to change because of them. Good point. Look within. Check your ego. Meditate. We'll always say meditate. We had an episode on that. Remember, change is imminent. The universe is always changing, always happening, and as such, everything has its moment to be. You also can change from one moment to the next. This dynamism can be seen as a blessing when cultivating tolerance. Use your power, keep perspective, and practice patience, which it also doesn't tell you how to do. Apparently, there's a secret to being an exceptionally tolerant person. And one of the things that stood out to me about this idea of being tolerated is not a fun experience on the other side of it. Like, we talk a lot about tolerance and tolerating people, and yet the experience of being tolerated is actually pretty shitty. It makes you feel pretty awful about yourself. So going back to this idea that we kind of raised when we first started trying to define tolerance, that like being tolerant is not about putting up with people, right? It's about entering every interaction with an open heart and mind. It's a whole different concept. It's much bigger. It's more like unconditional love, which does bring me back to this idea of like, do we even have different spiritual principles? Or are they all just really versions of this one thing we're practicing? This open spirit of lovingness and compassion and empathy towards people. Like, is that really the only spiritual principle that is real?
Yeah, I think that definitely starting at the again, my understanding of unconditional love is more in line with that. Like, I'm approaching the world with an open mind and an open heart, and I start at a place of love, and then I build out these specific skills needed in different situations, tolerance being one where people have things that I don't agree with, or maybe even ideas that I find offensive, and how do I want to deal with those things?
I think this is what it is. I think this is what I'm seeing as the disconnect for me. I think these were ideas that before we had a real understanding of what was going on for people, which in my mind we do now. Maybe we don't, but in my mind we do. In my mind, the research says people are hurt. They get behaviors modeled for them, and then they turn out that way. Like, that's just how the fuck it works, right? And again, that's not like fucking verified information. That's what I believe. But I think spiritual principles, like you said, you like start with this unconditional love idea and build out to these specific skill sets. To me, that sounds like how you would design a program to solve our problem of acting on character defects if you didn't understand that all the acting on character defects came from a place of being hurt when you were younger. Like, if you didn't understand character defects to actually be coping skills, covering up ways you are still in pain, then yes, you would design this program of like, well, let's attack these skills by putting the opposites in their place. That'll just fix everything, right? But when you kind of start to understand that there's actually pain underneath of it, well, the solution then just becomes healing the pain. And then unconditional love is the only one you need, because when you have that spirit, you don't actually need minor skill sets to handle each individual thing. You just come with the right spirit.
Yeah, and that's trying to go back a long way. But I don't know that I connected those dots in that way, but I sort of was given the message that my character defects were my coping skills for life, in a basic gist of my first round through the steps. I don't know that I connected it back to trauma and, that was conditioned from my childhood. I don't know that I made that connection, but I did have someone explain to me, like, these character defects are your coping mechanisms for life that don't fucking work, by the way.
So, yeah, we should do the quiz. I like the quiz idea. I do want to thank you guys for having, I really feel the grace of everyone's tolerance today. So thank you for tolerating me.
We don't have to do the quiz if you want to keep
I
talking.
want to do a quiz.
But
Doggy style.
Okay. We're doing a quiz. It's 9 questions. I'll send you the link so you can put it in the show notes. All right, folks. You have suggested an initiative at work, but no one has signed up for it. You, A, wish you hadn't mentioned anything because some people are choosing not to speak to you. B, organize a meeting so that you can explain to everyone what your intentions are. C, let it go. People are too self-absorbed to take any notices. Or D, talk to people individually to persuade them and succeed in getting all the signatures you need.
What about E, withdraw and hate everybody and assume they all hate me?
Or I was going to say E, withdraw, and then
C?
talk about all those people behind their back.
Yeah, they're all shitty.
That's included in
Get
there.
a different workplace. What was C again then?
C, let it go. People are too self-absorbed to take any notices.
Oh, no. I'm definitely not letting it go. I'm E. I'm like completely in my lower nervous system, disconnected, withdrawn, not answering text messages. Like, fuck all those people. They don't like me.
Yeah, but C is, it's let it go, but not from a healthy place. It's like, let it go because these people are jerks.
let the action go.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Okay.
you're dropping
Yeah.
the initiative and you have a resentment.
Yeah. Oh, that's me. That's totally me.
I'm going with D.
I would say probably D.
D, too. That's my manipulative self. I'll get what I need. So I don't even know how to rate this. Who are we going to go with? We don't have really consensus. I guess that all 3 were D.
Yeah. Go
only-
with the consensus.
Okay. All right, next question.
But that does explain why y'all don't understand me. Very deeply. But
Actually,
nobody else would just go home and cry and say, fuck those people.
I think I understand. I think I follow you. Sorry I didn't pipe up, but
No,
I'm just,
no,
I'm
it's
just taking
cool.
it in. I think I understand. All right, 2. You are queuing up to see a film. I think this is
This
in
must be
English.
British, yeah.
You are queuing up to see a film when your friend
line.
criticizes Woody Allen. You love his films. You, A, find their remarks very interesting and start to see the director in a new light. B, listen carefully before giving your point of view. C, let them have their say but secretly wish you could give them a slap. D, get in a temper and leave.
None of those. I'm not going to listen very carefully, and I'm going to give my point of view.
I mean, this is a really tough one because Woody Allen is not the most liked person.
Yeah.
He's controversial.
What do you think, Billy? I'm going to go to
Immediately,
somebody
I
take
went
this
to like,
seriously.
art stuff is so way over my head. I usually don't have any opinions about art stuff because I'm an idiot when it comes to interpretations of art.
I'm listening. I'm listening. I'm a
Yeah.
listener.
You're a listener. You're
Yeah.
not an idiot.
Yeah, I listen. I know what my strong suits are in interpreting art. Like, I look at a picture, a weird looking piece of fruit. I'm like, it looks like my 7-year-old did that and messed it up. Like,
I probably am not. I'm going to cut them off. Like, I just know myself. So
Okay. I don't know. I think I would probably listen to their. I would probably get persuaded because I tend to forget that Woody Allen slept with his stepdaughter and married her. I don't know.
I mean, Woody Allen's stepdaughter also slept with her stepfather. We don't say that portion of it. Just saying.
Well, was she a child when this started though? Can we-
14. I
Oh,
think.
okay, never mind. I
Yeah.
completely withdraw my statement.
Yeah.
Whoops.
You're like
Didn't know all the
14.
facts.
Yeah.
My bad.
Um,
Yeah, he's a douche.
All right. I'm not slapping
I think
anybody.
most people were B.
B. Okay. Thanks.
I thought A was listen.
Find the remarks and see the director in a new light.
A was get
Listen
persuaded
carefully.
by their opinions.
I mean, I'm open to it. Like if I don't know, like just now, I didn't know she was 14, right? I'm open to y'all giving me new information and being like, oh, wait a minute, my fucking opinion is wrong. Never mind. So I'm a A, I think. Not that I'm definitely going to be persuaded, but I'm open to what they're saying.
This is, you listen carefully and you see. You know,
Okay.
you find their remarks interesting and start to see them in a new light. So
Okay.
this is like,
Go with B then.
See them in a new light doesn't mean you're buying it. You're
Right.
just
You might be
seeing
like,
it in a new
oh,
light.
God, this person's
Like,
opinions
okay.
suck. Why have I been seeing movies with them? I got to get out of this queue. Sorry.
All right.
What's the
Number
next?
3. Your partner wants to go on holiday to Iceland, but you want to go to Morocco. How do you resolve this? A. Decide that Iceland's a great idea after all. B. Discuss it, each of you describing what you'd like to do. C. Debate it at length, trying to put your point of view across. D. Decide to go to Morocco, whether your partner is in agreement with you or not.
E. Put that bitch in the randomizer.
I would be B.
I'm a B. Discuss it. All right. You know what, though? Admittedly, though, I can probably C. Try to persuade. Like,
yeah, I want to say I'm a B, but I probably would be C.
oh, we got 2 C's.
I'm probably going to try to persuade while I discuss it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can discuss it,
obviously
but I'm
I
going to
want
try
my
to get
way.
my
That's
way.
why we're discussing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. C it is.
I don't even think B is
But
a
like
possible
traveling,
option.
I'm like, I'll fucking go anywhere, especially places I've never
Right.
been.
Really
Like,
might
I don't
legit
care.
be a B.
Mm-hmm.
I could too. Honestly, I don't really care that much.
What is tolerance?
Oh my.
A. Is it holding out your hand to others? B. Is it the ability to listen? C. An open door. Or D. Is it taking a firm line?
B.
I don't think any of those are mutually exclusive.
No.
I could definitely take a firm line and still listen and be open.
Hmm.
That's a shitty question.
I
If I
went
had to
with
pick
B,
one,
the
I would
ability-
say B. For me, that's
Yeah.
what it
I
would
was
be.
gonna go with
ability
B.
to listen.
Go with that one.
I like A. I wouldn't have come up with A on my own, but I like it. Maybe my instinct probably would have been more B.
B. It's 1 a.m. and a noisy party is still going on next door. You, A, keep quiet about it for the sake of peace. B, go join them. C, go and remind them what time it is. D, circulate a petition to the whole block of flats to get the noisy neighbors evicted. Holy shit.
Oh, wow.
Call the
Call the
cops.
police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would tolerate it for a little bit. We have that periodically, and usually I'm like, all right, I'll give a reasonable amount of time.
Oh, if it's like after 10, I'm calling the cops.
What do they call the police in Britain? Don't they have a name?
The patty?
Fuzz? I don't know.
Ah, no, I thought they had a special name.
Police?
The bobbies?
Oh, that might be it.
Yeah. Anyway.
Their sirens sound different.
God, what was A and B? I know it wasn't C.
A was keep quiet about it for the sake of peace. B, go join them, which is what I thought
A, I would
Jason
be
would
A.
say. A, keep quiet about it for the sake of peace. And that is
Yeah.
what I do. My neighbors still party.
Yeah, I would be A.
And they wake me up and I'm like, fuckers. But then,
Is that because you know they would know it was you?
no, I don't know. I think I'm really stuck in a place. I know my neighbors are sick people. And I'm just like, well, this is how they are. I used to be the same way. I kind of go that way.
Yeah. Well, we had to deal with that
So
a
true
lot when we were
tolerance.
doing like the campground stuff. And usually I would tolerate it. And then if there were people that I saw, I would go talk to them when they were not drunk, you know, and be like, hey, you guys are up too late being too loud. I got kids. Can you keep that shit down?
Yeah. It's that sake of peace, though. Like, so, you know, I just like,
But is it peace? I mean, how do you know your kids aren't highly disturbed by being woken up by that regularly?
yeah, I don't know.
And how do you know they're not taking that to mean, oh, this is just acceptable and we should
Yeah.
tolerate it the rest of our lives too?
Now, I did go over, so one of their guests ran over something in our like
I
our.
thought you were going to say like your cat or
Oh
something.
no, no. An inanimate object, and like one of their guests were intoxicated and ran over a piece of our property. And I went over. I was like, "Yo," I was like, "We're cool, but when this happens, we're not cool." And he's like, "I'm really sorry, Miss Jenny," So I kind of, I don't know, scared him for the next couple months, I guess, till it happens again.
Does the Buddhism talk any bit about the idea that when you don't do what's best for you in that situation, how it cultivates a negative feeling towards the person because you're not actually addressing the pieces that they're bothering?
I'm sure somewhere in there you could
Okay.
patch a little story to match
Right,
that.
right.
Yeah.
Dave's probably got one about
Right.
a fig leaf or something.
I think the
Right.
Buddhist recovery
Falling
community
on a
does
frog's
want
back.
you to stick up for yourself. Yeah.
I just thinking of that idea. Like I just personally believe we should always be doing what's best for us, and that will turn into what's best for everybody at some point, right? So like
Yeah.
maybe what's best for you is calling the cops, and maybe what's best for them is getting in trouble with the law to find treatment. I don't know. Like I'm not saying it is for sure,
Yeah.
but I
Well,
just,
here's also my experience for the police in Cecil County is you call them and they're going to come maybe in the morning,
2
do
hours
a drive
later.
by,
Right.
and my neighbors have had the cops called on them so many
gotcha.
times, so I know that's not an effective
Right,
solution.
right.
So it's not even
That's
on the table. So yeah, it's keeping the peace. It's political. It's like, all right, so I could piss them off now. I'm not really worried about them retaliating, but I just don't think it'll do any good.
My solution to this was just to buy a shit ton of properties so that
I would move.
no one's
Yeah.
parties
That-
bother me at all anymore.
Yeah.
quiz.
Quiz. All right. So what are we doing? We're going to keep quiet about it, or go
Yeah, I
remind
was-
them what time it is?
No, we're all keeping quiet. I think that's what everybody's saying.
Okay.
Mostly.
It's a
I
short
don't know what I
quiz.
would do,
Hey.
honestly.
Whatever A
And
was.
call the cops. I know that 100%.
But-
100%.
But
I
you got that
probably-
big property, so
I would
you
never
don't,
call
you
it.
don't have to worry
Well, I
about
can't
it.
say
Yeah.
never. I don't call the
an
cops.
Built
apartment,
in.
I did call the cops.
It depends. One night, maybe not. But if it's a regular happening, yeah.
If it's
Oh,
a
you're
regular
not
happening,
tolerating that.
yeah. But if it's once, every couple weeks or
No,
months,
that's
I'm
regular,
fine.
Jenny.
That's
Oh,
I mean once, like literally once.
okay.
They get a freebie for me, and then that's it.
All right. So you're on the phone to a friend, and it's clear they are feeling depressed for no particular reason. You say you feel sorry for them, but offer to ring them back for a chat about it another time.
Jeez.
B, right, offer to go over for a chat. C, go over with a comedy to watch. D, take them to a party to cheer them up. I'm C. I'll probably bring a comedy. Come over and try to cheer them up.
I mean, it wouldn't be party, of course, in recovery circle. I think meeting. So I would say probably D. Was it D? Was take them to a party?
Take them to
I'd probably
take them to
yeah.
a meeting.
Take
Replace
them to a
Yeah.
whoopee party.
Yeah.
Or just get together. Hey, you want to go get something to eat, or you
That'll
want to
cheer
go
'em
hit
up.
a meeting, or you want to, get out. Like to me, getting out is
Man,
good.
you sound depressed, buddy. Why don't you come out to this whoopee party and we'll talk about our wives? I'm sure that's the core of your problem anyway.
Wait, whoopee parties are not about pie?
I'm doing some version of B, personally. It might not be go to their house. It might be pick them up and get coffee. It might be
Yeah.
them come to me. But there's some version of me trying to talk to them,
Yes.
probably.
Is
I
offering
agree
a
with that.
distraction like a comedy less than? I think we should just laugh, I guess.
To me,
It's-
that's
it's-
like dismissing of their feelings.
It's the
Like,
spiritual
True.
bypassing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Jenny got a F for that one. What about you, Caroline?
I'm going to go with B.
We need a buzzer.
All right. Whoops. 2 in
Sit
a
here
row
and
for
buzz
me.
people.
Ugh,
That intolerant stamp.
I'm
across-
too tolerant. All right. We're up to 7. You're abroad and a local family invites you to share their meal. It's on a communal plate and you all use your fingers. You, A, have a little bit to eat just to make them happy. B, are pleased to be participating in a local way of life. C, hope they've all washed their hands before eating. D, are glad that you don't have to eat like that every day.
C.
I'm C also.
That
So-
doesn't even take into consideration whether I can eat this local fare somewhere else in the world. As a selective eater, that's kind of important. Sorry. I need to know this information. I'm assuming I can eat it. I'm all in.
Yeah, where's the
Yeah,
option that's
I'll
like
probably just
you
eat
don't
it.
eat because that's disgusting, and
think
you
that's
know
D.
that you were with them an hour before,
Oh, no,
you
D
know
didn't
they
say
didn't
that.
wash their hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on what it is
Yeah.
and who it is. Like,
This quiz is assuming we're people pleasers already. Like all the options are you're going to please these people.
Yeah.
What's the way you're going to do it? That's
yeah,
interesting.
I might not eat it.
I'm
I would
definitely
eat it.
eating it. If I can eat it, I'm eating.
I would probably take from the part that like no one else had touched yet.
I am literally bending over the table and taking the food off the tray with my mouth. Fuck it. Let's do this. Let's all just bury our heads in this plate. No, it just doesn't bother me. My hands aren't that clean. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. I'm probably B or C, but you wouldn't touch it, Billy?
I mean, it depends on what we were doing. Like, if it's at like a fair or something, that's one thing. But if we just all went like horseback riding, or like we're at a farm or some shit, where I'm like, dude, this is gross. I get a little
Why does it immediately
germaphobic.
involve animals?
Because I think that's
Right.
Billy's
Because we
upbringing.
live in the country.
He's like, remember when we
Yeah.
got drunk around the
City,
horses?
yeah.
Remember when we used the horses, stuff?
All right. Next question. One of your friends is pregnant, but continues to have the odd cigarette. You, A, don't want to upset her, so you steer clear of the subject. B, suggest trying relaxation techniques instead. C, put together some information for her on the dangers for the fetus of smoking during pregnancy. D, find her behavior so unacceptable that you don't feel you can see her anymore.
All right, here's my
None of
fail.
these.
Here's my fail. Here's my
Okay.
I see a person that was pregnant. The baby's here at this point, but they smoked during their pregnancy lightly, and yet they made the comment in session like, I had my cigarette here and there, but that's not bad for him, and I totally let it go. I didn't fucking challenge it or nothing, and that is so unlike me, and I knew it, and I was like, oh.
But you were in your
Fail.
professional role. It's not your job to manage
It's totally
her.
my job.
Is it? Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, how can I see something in somebody's life that I know is unhealthy and not give them at least the factual information about it? Like, that's a disservice. And
I won't name any names. I was married to someone who smoked during their pregnancies.
I would
Not all of them,
assume.
but
I would assume that the person already knows and is struggling with it, and probably doesn't need me to flash it up in their face. If they brought it up, I would probably do the relaxation suggestion. But
So what's the
I wouldn't bring it up
options?
myself.
I mean, I can tell you exactly what I did was made my argument, got pissed off about it, and then let it go.
that was your baby though, so that's
Yes.
a different.
I have a funny story.
I'm glad I didn't have to be the one to stop smoking because I don't think I could have. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I just think
Fortunately, I quit
I don't
before I got
judge.
pregnant. So it wasn't an issue. So back when I was a drinker, I went to the one of the local bars, and the bartender was pregnant. And then there was a big chalkboard, and all the regular patrons it was like a fundraiser, like you pay $1 to guess the weight. And so they had like, whatever, like 5 through 10 with all the ounces there too. And you'd sign up for a name, pay $1. And then the $1 went to like her baby shower fund or something like that. Well, she's smoking. She's a bartender. And I guess she was smoking in the bar. Could we still smoke in bars then? And I was just laughing at all the low birth weight. Like all the people who like had
wow.
bought tickets for like the low birth weight.
Wow.
Not a lot of 10-pound baby guesses. Like,
Jesus. and look, that's our society, though. We'll all know, and nobody says nothing. Mm-hmm. Right?
yeah.
And that's...
Was
I
she
mean-
little though? Because I feel it.
She was full on pregnant.
No.
she-
I
a
mean, like,
little
was she a
frame.
big woman or a
Oh.
little woman?
She is on the taller side, yeah.
Okay.
But actually, I might not even remember it closely. Like I might have restructured it in my head because it's so funny to all the low birth weight votes. Anyway.
Jenny just picked a low birth weight with her entry.
Oh, I didn't
She
even
was
play.
Like,
I was like, it's super judgy, but it kind of disgusts me. Like, I mean, lucky me, I quit smoking before I had, my babies. But
Well, this quiz just made me depressed.
Is that the 9th question?
one more.
Okay. Hopefully it's happier.
Okay.
Can we not talk about?
Rainbows and unicorns. The end.
You take rainbows and unicorns to Disneyland for a day. How do you tolerate it?
This is an interesting one. Of the following, what is the most important thing in life? Knowing how to be conciliatory? God, I'm going to have to look that word up. Respect, knowing when to trust people, or having a strong character. What is the most important thing in life?
Having a strong character.
I
Conciliatory
understand
means to
conciliatory,
get
I
along
think.
with people.
Okay.
And intended or likely to placate or pacify.
Oh, that's a little
Thank you.
different than getting along.
Yeah. That was what...
Knowing how to placate, respect, knowing when to trust people, having a strong character.
Respect.
I'm going to go with respect as well.
Really? I don't even think respect's a real word.
Well, I mean, like,
In that context, it's the best.
that's
one, I
and that's
think.
not a
That's what I
placating
agree with you.
respect. It's about like I see you, I see you, I see you. You know, like we're all individuals.
Right.
That kind of respect.
Right. Like you have a right to exist and have an opinion. I have a right to exist and have opinion. You know.
Is that what respect means?
Well, in this context, out of those 4 words that I get to pick from,
What
yes.
were the other ones? What
That's
was
the way
C
I'm
and D?
interpreting it there.
C is knowing when to trust people,
I kind of like that.
and D is having a strong character.
I kind of like that. But what I think of when I think of strong character isn't like somebody who's loud and takes over the room.
It's integrity.
It's somebody who like knows who they are and does that regularly. Like they're consistent. They show up the same pretty much all the time.
I put that on me. I don't necessarily put that on other people.
What is the most important thing in life? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't say in your life. It just says in life. So
Yeah, and some of these definitions work for me of respect, even though I don't think the idea is real. But due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. I like that. Feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like that one.
Should not be about their abilities, qualities,
No,
or achievements.
I agree.
Just be. Okay, I'll agree. I'll consent. I'll tolerate you guys picking fucking.
Long episode.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, your result. You're a good listener. You listen to others without judging them.
Is
and
that
you
what that
have
was about?
an
I thought it was for
excellent.
tolerance.
Well, this is your level. You know, like this is what they're. I'm not going to read you the whole paragraph.
What if I can
It was-
tolerate things more when I hear them than I can visually? Like, what if I have a hard time tolerating visual disturbances in my environment, but not audio disturbances?
I wonder if that relates to how you learn.
I feel like mine is actually the opposite. I feel like I struggle with audio disturbances in my environment, whereas video disturbances or like people moving doesn't bother me as much. It still bothers me, though.
Sometimes when I listen to like Dharma talks, I have to shut my eyes because I just want to listen because I can't have too much visual distraction.
Sometimes when my kids are talking to me, I can't think. It's like too many fucking words or
Yeah,
something.
I knew it.
My brain
Well,
just
that's
won't.
sort of what I thought with tolerance is sometimes I hear stuff in the moment. Like I have to like almost walk away from a conversation or be separated from something to like the next day to sort of fully like
Process.
like process and make sense of it, especially when I'm
Yeah,
like
I
talking
get
with
that.
the wife or the kids and there's a lot of emotion involved. When I can step back out of some of the emotion and like, all right, let's think about what she was actually saying without all the emotion attached to it, it allows me to be more tolerant.
Without the nervous system activation.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's it. Anybody got anything else?
yes, I
Tolerance?
do. So
Okay.
one thing that helped me with tolerance, besides trying to practice tolerance, which I don't know that necessarily
like
helped
white knuckling it?
so much. Yeah. So
Which we say doesn't work.
one thing that inadvertently helped me with to build tolerance for other people was my 6 step.
I thought you were going to talk about the memes.
The memes have really helped me build tolerance for people.
I thought that audio versus visual reference was in relation to my not tolerating the memes, but tolerating the audio comments.
No, I was literally
That's what I
thinking
thought
of
that was
like
about.
sitting in my household environment and what activates my nervous system the most. And I feel like there is a different level of activation. Like I can do with movement better than lots of noise. TV up too loud freaks me the fuck out. Just like I'm like I either need to leave this room or we got to turn that
Yeah, I
down.
don't like- I
now.
don't like
It's
noise.
Do you think
like
there's any
fucking
relation to
bothering
how
me.
you learn? Are you an audio learner, visual learner? Do you think it's any relation to that?
I don't know if it's any relation to that. I think it's in relation to like what I saw in my house. Like the audio cues were the things that were disturbing and scary, right? There wasn't a lot of like that always happened first. The visual stuff was later down the line. You saw that coming by then, but the audio one signaled, oh shit, there's been a shift in this house and I better get my shit together and be on point.
Is it just not though that like when it's something visual you can move your eyes away from it, but when it's audio it's much harder to get away from it?
Nice.
I'm not sure, but I will say that like the peripheral, like my son is a fucking bouncy little guy, and the peripheral still like, I mean, I guess it's easier to close your eyes than it is to try to close your ears, but yeah, I don't know. I do think the audio just gets me more. It's like instantly activated.
Have you seen those? They have those like earbuds now for people who are overstimulated by. Have you?
No, I haven't, but I was also thinking the other day that I need fucking like.
It's become a very real thing. Like
no, I was
Is
thinking
that
I
an
need
ADHD thing?
I need hearing aids. So I don't know. That might be
don't
the
think
opposite.
you need that. That sounds.
I don't
sounds
know.
worse.
I see somebody with hearing aids, and I'm like, I don't hear real well either, and I never get this checked out.
But you already have an issue with noise. You shouldn't
yeah,
amplify
yeah,
it.
I don't. Is there a way to like amplify the noise I want? Anyway, what was your point of your statement here?
I was
Sixth
just
step.
saying that.
Oh, yes. No, the sixth step I would think was super valuable, even though I didn't have the ability to fully conceptualize the practice of it because I hadn't done the healing yet. I do think just being aware of all the places where I do make mistakes or I'm human that I couldn't see before, because my defense mechanism for that was to cover it up, right? It was to blame the people around me for why things went wrong. That was the only way I knew how to survive. And so seeing that I also screwed up quite frequently did make me feel a little more compassionate for other people.
Yeah, and to me, the tolerance now comes from just like the idea of, information I might have said to sponsees early on, realizing what terrible information that was. What makes me think that the information I'm giving right now isn't equally as fucking terrible because there's information that I don't have or things that I don't know or a perspective that I haven't thought of.
So humility.
So I could be as equally giving bad information now and thinking that I'm so much smarter.
Well,
That it just gives me the ability to not have to be right all the time or feel like it's my job to fix the world.
and the opposite end of that spectrum, I think, for me, one of my, I don't want to say it's a fear, but one of the things that comes into my mind is that if I believe that there's something better way that we can help people coming into recovery, that I can't sit around and just be tolerant that we hold on to these old beliefs or programs or ideals that haven't changed, and I feel like might be actively keeping us from finding the help we need, right? So for me to just tolerate that and think that is not healthy for me. So I got to know my line in the sand of like, where is the place where I need to stop tolerating things and I need to speak up for them because they seem wrong or not okay to me. And I think that's a thing we need to ask ourselves when we're talking about tolerance. Is this even a place I should have it? Or is this a place where I need to make a stand?
Yeah, we're looking for opportunities where we can express our ideas and opinions openly.
Right. So thank you all for the ability to do that here.
Yes, I love it.
This is
Helped
our
me
first.
tremendously here.
Before we go, this is our first episode, all four of us too.
Is it?
Yeah.
Hooray for us.
Yeah.
And we all tolerated each other.
Mm-hmm.
All right, go out there and
More than
practice.
tolerated each other.
We did. No, we did tolerance the way we believe tolerance exists, which is entering every interaction with an open heart and open mind. All right, go out there and practice that version of tolerance with the people around you. See you next week. Did you like this episode? Share it with people you think might get something out of it. Check out the rest of our episodes at recoverysortof.com. Also, while you're there, you can find ways to link up with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, anything. We're always looking for new ideas. Got an idea you want us to look into? Reach out to us.